Okay. So we'll start with that collaborative AI mindset where we're not just going to go on gut instinct as radio professionals, even though our gut instinct is great and it's what we get paid for. But this idea that we're going to have to validate, stress test, back up with data our ideas in order to get them over the line, particularly as we mentioned with yourself, Emma, the higher the production, the more time and money it involves, the more of a case we're going to have to build. So can we lean on some of these AI tools in order to do that? So we'll break it down into the sort of three stages of making a podcast, I guess. Stress testing. So we're going to ask, is there a demand for a podcast like this, like the idea I've had? If so, who are the people who are likely to listen to that podcast? Does this audience want to hear this exact podcast that we're thinking of? Or based on the data, can we make something better? And with all of that in mind, what is the best format for this show? So looking at kind of the big trends and data around the amount of what length podcasts are, what format ones are popular, marrying that with our audience research, can we kind of get a good stab at a format, a style, a structure, a cadence that will potentially work for me? And again, we're not outsourcing this and just taking everything verbatim, as you should never do with AI, but it does help open up ideas for us and add. So it's kind of like, if you're kind of trying to come up with a show for this afternoon. So in the last word, we'd have a team of 5 people. If I sat in a room by myself and came up with the last word, is that going to be as good a show as if I had my team of 5 people around me feeding in ideas and offering different perspectives? Of course not. That's what we're doing here with stress testing our idea. We're building a team. Okay. We then want to make an engaging and professional sounding show. So that's all about high quality audio, editing with speed and precision. Okay. And designing as rich a listener experience as we can. Okay. And then finally, we want to get discovered and we want to grow our audience. So that's all about increasingly creating social ready video clips, creating video when you have no video, because even though we may, and I fall into this category, podcasts, I'm an audio purist, I'm an audio evangelist, but I'm very aware that we need video to support the growth of our audio. And whether that's bits of video taken directly from what we've created, or whether it's new video that simply points people to the audio we've created. When you look at this, every week there's a new sort of statistic out around YouTube and the amount of people that are discovering podcasts on YouTube, and obviously the amount of people who become aware of podcasts on social. These platforms run on video. So I think we have to be creating video of some description, whether you are recording video as part of the source audio or whether you have no video at all. I'll show you a couple of platforms that allow you to create video in order to sort of have a presence on those platforms and hopefully grow your show. And then crunching the numbers and turning your metrics into actionable data. What are we learning about the shows that we have in order to sort of, do them better and to position them better? Okay. So let's start with idea validation. To be very businessy about it, we have our product, which is our podcast idea. We have the market, which is all the people that are going to listen to it. And then somewhere in the middle, we need to find product market fit, which is essentially our business model, which is essentially the podcast idea that we land on and generate. So I'm going to start with an initial idea. And so I just got a sense, well, we have some sports people on the call. We have some travel people on the call. So I thought, let's start with an idea that we can kind of road test and see how we can use some of these platforms to test it and to hone it and to maybe help us create the final version. Okay. So based on my gut instinct, I kind of have a sense that, yeah, particularly with the World Cup on now at the moment and, the Olympics and all that kind of stuff, there must be a good show in a podcast about sports travel. So basically sports fans who aren't just kind of sitting on the couch watching the stuff, but they want to get up and out. They want to spend their money traveling. They want to go to places and have a sport as part of the experience or the whole experience. And they want information and ideas about how to do it well. Okay. So our kind of tagline is going to be, we're helping sports fans plan unforgettable trips around live sporting experiences. Okay, so that's what we're going to say about the podcast. It's kind of stuff like rugby weekends, golfing breaks, football city breaks, Olympic destinations, Formula One trips, if we were to throw down some initial ideas. Okay, so what I want to do is not just say, I think this will work, and have a couple of friends go, yeah, I'd listen to it, and then go in and pitch it to my program director, or, to my wife or husband, who I'm not going to see for a while as I make this thing. Let's just see how we can use some of the AI tools to sort of stress test it and build on it. Okay. So from a very technical perspective, we're going to call this our AI validation work stack. So I'm going to take 4 free and freemium AI platforms that are going to allow us to marry our gut with data. Okay. In plain English, I think what we can call this is we're assembling a team of fellow podcasters or podcast experts. This team has access to very valuable and relevant data, and lots of it. And they're going to help us stress test our idea and develop it into a show that has has the best chance of success. Okay. So like me in the last word editorial meeting, the people around the room have their own skills, their own sets of knowledge, their own sort of approach to life. And together we'll hopefully create a better last word than I would have by myself. Okay. But ultimately, we're using our own sort of professionalism. So let's just think of it as a team. Okay. And this kind of leans into some of the individual strengths of some of these platforms that we know, but there's also all of these other ones that we don't necessarily know, but hopefully I'll introduce you to today. So it starts with you coming up with the ideas. So let's just call you the program director or the boss, whatever. Perplexity is one of those sort of large language models that is very good at research. It's very good at going out and finding vast amounts of research on Reddit, on YouTube, on all these places where people are spending time talking. It's gathering all the stuff that's out there. So they're going to help us to identify and find the audience and validate whether there is an audience for this. Okay, so they're a researcher. We then, need to analyze that, and we need to sort of take the audience data and the kind of people that might listen to our show, but then understand a bit more about them. Okay, this is our audience research department. These are the people who are going to go, yes, the kind of people you're talking about, they tend to fall into this age bracket, this gender bracket. They tend to spend time on these sites. They kind of search for stuff here. They go on these social media places. So this stuff is all very, very valuable when it comes to many parts of the process. Okay. ChatGPT is then going to take what we've learned and it's going to interpret what all this means. Okay. So based on the audience you've identified, based on their habits and their behavior, this is what I think this could mean for your podcast. Okay. And a podcast that might appeal to those. That might be the same as the one we initially came up with, or it might be kind of different, might have taken a different angle in order to find, it might have identified what we'd call the white space. Here's the unique opportunity. And you kind of touched on this, Ed. We want to find the angle that's not already being covered. We have a gut feeling there is, but we want to prove that and in as much as we can. So that's our strategy consultant. And then we're going to ask Claude, who's very good at design, deep thinking and design, to take all of that and then suggest the podcast that might work for us. And again, it's all based on our initial idea. We're not taking it verbatim, but it is giving us a structure to work with. Okay. And then we can kind of get the human back on board and tweak it to the knowledge we have of our own audience. Okay. So we're going to road test this. And this is all about good prompts. Okay. We've heard of that kind of thing, it's all about the prompt. It's not just using AI as a search engine. It's about telling it, this is who you are and this is what I want you to do. Okay, so I've got some suggested prompts in here that we can work with as well. And again, we are not outsourcing our creativity. We're overcoming our uncertainty. Okay, and that's really important because there's going to be people we're pitching to who all very well about our gut instinct, but they want to see some research. They want to see some data. They want to see some proof. Okay. So the first question we are going to ask is there a real audience out there? Is it growing? And what problems do they have? Because a great podcast or great content of any description solves people's problems. It reacts to, it's based around people's pain points, the things they need to know, the things they need to feel, the things they need to understand. Okay. So the best content starts by us understanding what they need from us. Okay. So we're not going to kind of ask Perplexity, is this a good idea? We're going to look for evidence that it is, and maybe some counters to that as well. Okay. So let's start the process with our prompt. So let me jump into my prompt doc. Okay, so I have these written out. So our Perplexity prompt, starting with scratch. I'm considering launching a podcast called the Sports Fans Travel Guide. Research online discussions and identify who travels for sport, why they travel, frustrations they experience, unmet needs, emerging trends in sports tourism. And I want you to look at forums, Reddit discussions, industry reports, and travel publications. All of this lovely research. Okay, that's going to be step one. So I'm going to open up Perplexity, which either comes as a browser app, and so I'm sure I'm sharing the right screen. Can everyone see Perplexity on my screen now? Okay. It comes as a desktop app or a browser. So I'm simply going to feed that in. And they all work, in the same way. You just feed in your response. So it will look familiar as per ChatGPT, as per Claude. They all have sort of a freemium model. So you're going to get quite a bit of functionality out of the free version. And then you're going to get, quite a lot of, way more when you have to pay for it. But generally, you don't have to pay for it. Okay. So this is what it gives me within seconds. So who travels for sport? Sports fans, 50% of travelers. And I'm not going to go through all this in detail. I just want to show you briefly kind of what it's coming back to you with. Okay. So it breaks it down into the different types of people who are traveling. Okay. Top sports, all the different people who might fall into your podcast audience. Okay. Because what we're trying to do is show scale, the amount of people who might be interested in what I'm going to talk about, why they travel, the live experience, which I think is going to become more and more, ironically, in a world of AI content online, the live experience is going to become way more important. Status and memory, connection, experiential value. This is all really interesting and important insight into terms of why someone might listen to my show and what I can give them, because this is what motivates them. The frustrations they experience. So ticket access, booking friction, hotel price spikes. These are all the things that they kind of want help to overcome. Unmet needs. So these are some of the gaps. Okay. So again, I'll just keep kind of going down quickly. Market size, destination-based events. These are all really, really, really valuable insights. The market is rapidly growing, but it's fragmented. Okay. So it's giving us a little bit of insight here. Okay. So that is basically based on one simple question. It has scraped millions of sites, forums, conversations, and boiled it down for us in a lovely little sort of synopsis here. Okay. But that's just stage one. I've got a picture of my audience, who it is, and what size it is. Okay. So I'm going to just go one step further here. I'm going to go back into my prompt, because the next stage is I want to get a bit more analysis of this audience and the size of the market. There's a very good tool called Spark Toro, which basically, based on a simple question and a bit of a sort of a request, will give you really rich data on your audience. So let's just go back into Perplexity. And I'll have all this on the slides very mapped out so you can kind of follow it in your own time if you wanted to give it a shot after. So I want to feed your findings into Spark Toro to get a better understanding of the audience you've identified and their behavior. Please present a list of audience types that I can copy and paste into that tool. Because each tool requires a specific kind of, type of prompt in order to work best for you. Okay. So that's basically just giving me a list. Sports fans who travel to attend live games and tournaments, people who travel exclusively because of millennials aged who prefer the live sports experience, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So I have sort of one I prepared earlier. Here is some of those. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste this first. And let's now have a look at our next step, which is Spark Toro. Again, it's freemium, and it's sort of, it sort of teases you with some of the basic stuff, but then you have to kind of pay to unlock a fair bit more, but it's a good place to start. So I'm just going to copy and paste in. So we've identified who our audience might be. Now we want to find out a bit more about them. So at the moment, it's limited in terms of things. So I'm just going to go to UK, and we're going to create a report. So it is going into tons of different pieces of research, demographics, market research, audience behavior research, social statistics, search data, and it's going to come up with some kind of interesting insights for us that we can kind of now combine and feed into our next phase of our thing. Okay, so very important at the top, and you'll all know someone in your station who's going to love this one. Our estimated audience size and the estimated market value. Okay, you won't always have to pull this out, but there's always going to be a number cruncher somewhere along the line who wants to know, like, okay, what's our potential audience and market here, because they're thinking, how am I going to pay for this thing? Okay, and all this stuff feeds into that. So it gives us our audience size, market value, but crucially, it says it's up 2% year on year. We all know from the JNLRs, we want to see that growth book on book or year on year. Gender breakdown, fairly healthy mix of male and female. Our ages, 26 to 35 is going to be our core audience, but followed closely behind by 36 to 50. So maybe our 26 to 50 is going to capture like almost 70% of the audience that we're trying to get. It tells us these sports travelers and these various categories, what social networks are they looking at, what search and AI tools they're using. Okay, all of this stuff is important because when it comes to marketing, when it comes to search engine optimization and having a presence on certain sites, we need to know like where we need to be, and then it gives us the kind of websites that they're visiting. And all of these now, we don't have to sort of sit here and go, now come up with a spreadsheet. We're going to take all this and feed it into the next stage of our process, which is helping us narrow down the focus to get to that right idea. Okay, so these are some of the websites that they'd like to go to. And these will tell us things that are interesting. And then if we spend a few quid, we can unlock YouTube channels, what other podcasts they're listening to, keywords, social accounts, subreddits, all that. Okay, but for now, we can just take that and download it as a PDF and use this to go on to the next stage of our process. At this point, we have used two tools, Perplexity and Spark Toro, and we've got two chunky pieces of research and data and analysis that we can combine into our next stage. Any questions so far? Is this feeling like it's fairly straightforward process so far, as long as we kind of create? And again, you might take this away and play around with it and create your own, let's call it our work stack, but it's all about a work stack, a process, understanding what's a logical step-by-step process using these platforms in order to help us shape our idea and to be able to give it some basis. Okay, any questions so far? Happy? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do, so what have we learned from Perplexity? We learned about the different kinds of sports travelers, what motivates them, what they find difficult or frustrating, and all of this, and then some of the emerging trends. And as program makers, this stuff is really good content in terms of what we're going to talk about, whether it's what we're going to talk about on our radio show, in our radio slot, or in our podcast series. Okay, what do people find annoying? Who are they? What do they find annoying, and what would make their lives better? So I can talk about that stuff no matter what the sort of structure is. Okay, so this is what AI is giving us so far. Then when we popped it into Spark Toro, we kind of said, so the audience exists. Now, who exactly are they and how do they behave? And we've learned the size and value of our target audience and market, the gender, the age of the majority of the target audience, and their online behavior, where they spend time on social networks, what kind of search engines they use. Again, which is all strong stuff for getting to the next stage. So based on all that, what does this audience insight really mean? And does it kind of start to change my original idea? Okay, is what I thought, is the market I thought I was going to talk to and what they want based on research really what people who I'm talking to and what people want? Or is there a better opportunity to kind of build on that a little bit? Okay, so ChatGPT is very good at strategy, taking the insights and helping us come up with a strategy as a result. Okay, so back to our prompt list. So onto ChatGPT. And just to make sure I'm still showing the right, are we all seeing the prompt on my Word doc? Okay. This is what I think is really important. Okay, we're not just sort of dealing with ChatGPT or any of these platforms as, you know, as a human being or as just this kind of all-knowing, all-seeing entity. We can tell them what it is. We can tell them what we want them to be. Okay, so we're going to start a prompt by saying you are a podcast audience strategist. That immediately shapes the focus that it's going to take. Okay, because just think this in terms of they're humans. Okay, and who do you want around that table? Okay, back to our meeting room in Marconi House or in Highland Radio or wherever we are. Who do you want around that table? You want the researcher who knows all the data, and now we want the person who can crunch that data, and now we want the person who can go based on that. Here's some of the things I think we could sort of do with this. So we're going to ask it to identify our audience segments, rank them by attractiveness, identify more about their motivations, frustrations, unmet needs, sponsor opportunities. And I think based on the idea that we want to make our idea better, we're going to say, we thought this audience was, but the evidence suggests that they are actually. Okay. And then we want to ask it for 3 podcast concepts, just to sort of get the ball rolling on that. Okay. So let us take that. I'm going to copy and paste that into ChatGPT. I'm going to attach our SparkToro report, which is here. And did I have my perplexity? Okay, let me see. So what we want is to just add, maybe make a little Word doc about this and attach it as well. And like we say, they're all doing their own individual things. Okay, so that's what's really important. Actually, do I have a perplexity report from before? Yeah, we just get a different format. And as I mentioned, we haven't spent any money so far. Okay, so that's always nice. And a lot of the time you will find you won't have to spend any money. Okay, so we're just going to put we're going to make another little Word doc with our perplexity response. Okay, and again, like you say, we're just feeding it. We're not asking it for ideas. We're not asking it, you know, lads, what should I be doing here? We're basically just testing our ideas using research. Okay. So already we're starting to narrow the focus. Okay. So based on our SparkToro audience profile and Perplexity market research, this is actually not a sports fan audience necessarily. It's a sports enabled travel audience. What does that mean? So we thought it might be sports fans who travel, but actually they are experience driven travelers who use sport as the reason to travel. Okay, so this changes things up. Okay, and as it says, it changes things about the content, positioning, sponsors, monetization. It's not a completely new idea, but we've used research to hone our idea. A lot of original idea still is in there, but actually what it means is there's a bigger audience than we thought, and it's all within the same category. Okay, so it starts to kind of break it down for us. The event weekend explorer, the away day loyalist, the bucket list sports tourist. You know, all of this stuff is really important for us, and particularly as radio professionals, you kind of want to see the person, don't you, in your head. You don't want to see a huge spreadsheet. And it's all about sort of saying, oh yeah, well, my standard listener is John, 36, who drives, home from work, and so he's listening to the last word, etc. So you start to break up all these segments, and it starts to say, well, actually, based on our research, the event weekend explorer is very high. Multi-experience traveler, very high. Monetization potential, all of this. Okay. Core motivations, they want an emotional connection. They want to feel part of something, have their identity, social connection, the experience. And all of this is really rich for us in terms of how to talk to our audience, how to break down the episodes, all of what comes with that. This is what frustrates them. Okay. No knowledge gap, biggest unmet needs. So we're just getting more and more granular, a better idea, very simply by using these platforms. Okay. And now it's giving us our 3 potential podcast concepts based on what we've learned. So the sports fans travel guide, the Lonely Planet for sports fans. So each episode is one destination, one event, where to stay, etc., etc., etc. It aligns directly with the unmet need in the research. Concept 2, away days. Stories from fans following teams around the world. Gives you a bit of content. And then we have our bucket list feature, which is, the big spend. I'm going to do this once. I'm going to go to Wimbledon. I'm going to go to the Ryder Cup, And so it's got the premium audience sponsor appeal. Okay. And it's going to kind of give us an idea of the strongest opportunity, etc., etc., and the risk. But look, we don't have to go into all that now, because what we want to do is just use our final stage to actually feed into our final platform to help us understand, of all these concepts, which is the one we should go with. Okay, so basically, what have we learned now from ChatGPT? We thought the audience was sports fans who travel, but actually they're experience-seeking travelers who happen to organize their trips around sport. So they're not just buying access to games and events. They want memories, identity, and stories. Okay, really, really important, valuable perception for us now, or a framing. Okay, so then finally, we're going to use Claude to go with everything we know now, which podcast concept deserves to exist the most. Okay, so back to our prompt for the final time. So now, similarly to what we did with ChatGPT, the prompt for Claude: you are head of podcast development for a major podcast network. Okay. Using the audience strategy attached, design the podcast most likely to succeed. And this is what we're going to ask for: our show title, positioning statement, the premise, the episode format, the actual thing we are going to make. And again, like with anything, we are not going to make this verbatim, but what it is giving us is rich insight into the kind of show structure, cadence, length that the audience we have identified, and marrying that with the market of the podcast market and what we know, what's going to have the best chance of success. Okay. So, and then we're going to ask it to build our ideal persona. So I'm just going to take, for the final time, the ChatGPT response. Okay, so this is our audience analysis. We'll just copy and paste on this, and audience strategy analysis. And we are going to get our prompt for Claude. And then again, we still haven't spent any money. This is still all freemium. So Claude, that's what I want you to do. And then I'm going to attach our analysis. And we shall see what it comes up with. And for some reason, I can't get to the click button. Okay. So this is the final stage of the core one, but there's a little bonus stage as well that you might enjoy, because I think there's a lot of words, there's a lot of data, isn't there? There's a lot of stuff coming at us now. That's because I'm throwing it at you now, but in time you played around that with yourself and put in your own idea, something like that. You will see how it all breaks down. But I'm an auditory learner. I'm someone who needs kind of to hear stuff explained as well. So there's an extra little step using an AI platform that I actually think is brilliant. Okay, which we'll take a look at in a moment. But let's just see what Claude has come up. So we've read all through the research. Here's a full podcast development brief in my role as a kind of head of podcast development for a major network. So, away game works on multiple levels. The away fixture, the away day, a fan culture, the feeling of being somewhere new is short, ownable, instantly signals the sports traveler intersection without spelling it out. The travel guide for fans who plan their life around sport. Okay, so it identifies the strongest white space. I think that's a really important thing to take away, is that there's over 7 million podcasts out there. Okay. And there is absolutely no point in coming up with something that somebody else is doing, or potentially there's 20 other people doing. Yeah, you might do it better. But I think the strongest opportunity is to identify the gap, the white space, the niche gap that has a massive audience, because there's still all that potential out there. And this is what we're trying to do here. Okay, so this is how some of these, our collaborative AI editorial team can help us do. So the show premise, each episode takes listeners inside one event or sporting destination, covering the match, the city, the logistics, give them everything they need to plan their own trip. And this is like they're attaching these to the unmet needs. Trusted match planning weekend. Gives us our episode format, our episode structure. Okay, and again, you can take it or leave it, but it's good for sparking ideas. Our episode length, 40, 50 minutes, long enough. Do they explain? The audience are active planners with high intent, so they will commit to a substantive listen when it saves them hours of research. I think that's really important as well. We're always struggling with, how long should my podcast be? And what I find is most people defer to the shorter the better, but I don't agree with that. I think it completely depends on your listener and what you're trying to give them. And what's interesting here is how they frame it. If you have a podcast that can save someone 10 hours of research in return for 50 minutes of their time, then they're happy to give it that time, as long as it's useful to them. Okay, so this is where the data can help us, and these tools can help us even to make those small decisions, if not the bigger ones. Okay, publishing cadence gives us an idea, season structure, etc., etc., etc. Guest strategy, audience growth strategy, YouTube strategy. Okay, and then we kind of breaks it down to a full brief. Okay, so what we've done is start with an idea that we thought was kind of based on our gut instinct, but actually we've managed to, based on rich audience demographic and behavioral data and deep analysis of the podcast market and audience, we've made a better idea. Okay, we've opened it up. We haven't changed it. It's just honed, and we have more of a sense of who we're talking to now. It's given us a sense based on industry data of the format, length, cadence, and tone that this audience is going to engage with. And it's given us a marketing strategy to promote the podcast and to grow the audience. Okay. And this is basically used just 4 steps, but using each of the AI platforms within that step to do its own thing. Okay. And to get us where we want to be. Okay. So now we have a slightly richer idea. What I'm going to show you last before we wrap up this section is, for me, I want to understand everything we've learned through audio and